I would now like to welcome our next speaker. Matt Simmons is going to be talking about how can chaos coerce clarity from compounding complexity. So, certainly, maybe I need the captions for my own reading.
Can chaos coerce clarity from compounding complexity? Certainly. Content carefully crafted, comprehensively compiled, cleverly curated, and captivatingly composed by yours truly. That's a lot of C words in one place. The slide, not the conference. If by C words you thought I meant conference goers, grow up. So we're going to talk about chaos and complexity and all those things. But I want to start with why I wrote this talk. Who's this for? Is it for you? Should you skip this one? And to answer that question, I guess I go into this with a couple of assumptions. Could be right, could be wrong. But the first is that the people that attend these conferences are mostly practitioners, which is to say, you are the people that actually are out there in the stack, working on the products and using chaos. The other thing that I sort of assume in this is that there are a fair number of people that are asking the question, can we get started with chaos, or how can I get started pushing chaos in my organization or starting it as a practice in my organization? Getting started with chaos in general. And getting started with chaos in general, I think is a two-part problem, or at least a two-part problem, which is to say that the first part of the problem is, how do I do chaos from a technical perspective? And the second part of the problem is, how do I actually start chaos as a practice within my organization? I have some experience with both of these, but of the two, I do believe that the second one is sort of a harder problem. This is maybe giving away the punchline of a talk that I'm giving next week at DevOps Enterprise Summit, but I do believe that almost every DevOps transformation that we try to perform or try to enact within the organizations that we're a part of, generally it's less about being successful in a transformation like that is less about the technical specifics of the transformation itself, or of DevOps, or of chaos in this case, and more about just organizational transformation in general and how difficult that is. So in trying to answer the question, how do we get started with chaos as a practice in the organization, this talk, if that's the question that you're trying to answer, this talk is for you. And what I want to try and do is arm you with some of the talking points, at least, or the arguments maybe that I have sort of come up with, the things that I've encountered. In some ways, this is sort of a war story, but I'll try and keep it conceptual to help arm you for those conversations that you'll need to have as a leader and as a champion for chaos within your organization. So I'm going to take a couple minutes just to kind of introduce myself, talk about me here at the beginning. I promise I won't take too long on this. But the first thing you should know about me is that I have a condition, which is that I am incapable of being photographed like a normal person. I do have a loving wife and partner, and I have very supportive family. So I'm coping. Professionally, I've been at Workiva for about 6 years, a little over 6 years. It's a great place to work. They've been very good to me. It's a really cool company. What we do there, to give you some background on the company, is we are a SaaS company that provides a platform for connected reporting and compliance. If you don't know what that means, that's cool. A lot of people don't. We are in the, I guess if we kind of come back to that, connected reporting compliance, what does that mean? What is that space? If you are part of a publicly traded company, there's a greater than 70% chance that your company uses our product to file with the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. That's sort of the product that we started with. We've worked into lots of other spaces in connected reporting and compliance. Sarbanes-Oxley, risk reporting, there's lots of them that I could name. You probably don't know or care about them, and that's totally cool. The short version is we're a SaaS company, we're cloud native, and we're pretty cool. At least I think so. All right. So moving into the meat of the talk now, can chaos coerce clarity from compounding complexity? That's a lot of C words. I want to move forward in in the alphabet now to D after having exhausted my entire C word vocabulary in the title slide. Yes, the entire vocabulary. Grow up. A D word here. So I'll give you a moment to kind of picture what that might be. If you guessed derecho, you guessed correctly. This was a word that was pretty unfamiliar to me until August. August was really interesting because I live in Iowa and we got hit by a derecho. Before then, my knowledge of this word was some vague memory of middle school Spanish and it being somehow related to directions. But as it turns out, a derecho, at least in this context, is a big ass storm that knocks things over in hurricane force winds. This is a picture that I took as the storm was winding down. This was in the middle of August, and we got hit where I live with winds, sustained winds of over 100 miles an hour in Iowa. Not a tornado, a hurricane. Sort of, it's weird. Didn't expect it. I remember very clearly that morning, I was sitting on a call, working from home as we do now, wearing my headphones, my noise canceling headphones. I got off the call, took off my headphones, and thought, is that the hurricane or the tornado siren? And sure enough, the tornado siren was going off. Look outside, the clouds are getting darker, that sort of like eerie shade of green that lets you know that Twisty Boys are somewhere in your future. And this was about 15 minutes before what you see here. Well, maybe 30 minutes, but 15 minutes before what happened in this picture started to kick off. So we had almost no warning. In fact, we didn't even have rain in the forecast that day. Big surprise. And it was catastrophic. The pictures here don't really do it justice. This was like, I walked outside and it was like a tree bomb had gone off and there was just shrapnel everywhere. It was memorable and kind of humbling to see. This is a cornfield. I didn't take this picture, but if you are familiar with corn, or maybe if you're not familiar with corn, if you don't live near an agricultural center like I do, they don't normally take naps like this. So this cornfield is essentially a total loss. And this was taken very close to where I live. In fact, this was taken from the Wikipedia page. And if you see in the caption there that it was taken near Roland, Iowa, I live in Roland, Iowa. And if you had told me that morning, if you had put the words in a sentence together in the same sentence, Iowa and category 4 hurricane, I would have laughed at you because our thing is tornadoes, not hurricanes. Coasts get that. I would not have predicted this, not in a million years. So what's the point of all this? I guess let me talk about this. We'll go here first. What do all of these people have in common? I'll tell you, it's that they all get paid to be wrong all the time. That's their job. Now, understandably, you're probably saying, hey, lay off Al Roker, Matt. That man is like a weather god. Show some respect. And you're right. I apologize, Mr. Roker. I apologize. But they are wrong all the time, even Al Roker. And the fact that we have this dialogue around weather, not in terms of whether or not it's wrong, but as a matter of degree, is very telling of the problem here, right? It's not whether or not they're wrong, it's how wrong are they? And as it turns out, weather is a very complex system, and very complex systems are very unpredictable. So when we talk about complexity and predictability here, the thing that we should understand is that as complexity within a system scales, predictability is inversely proportional to that scaling of complexity. Or maybe more simply put, as we increase in complexity in our systems, the predictability of those systems goes down. And sometimes we like unpredictable things, right? They can be fun, it can be exhilarating, but other times that unpredictability can be exciting for other reasons. And I would wager that your business, like mine, that the software products that you create and the market that you operate in is not one of those places that enjoys excitement in unpredictability. So I want to introduce you now to the concept of black swan. Many of you have probably already heard of this, what a black swan is. This definition comes from Merriam-Webster. It's not one of mine. There's no profanity in it. That's kind of the tell. but it's an unpredictable or unforeseen event, typically one with extreme consequences. It's also a book. So this is a book written by Nassim Taleb, fantastic book, you should read it. But in talking about black swans, let's sort of define this to make sure we're all on the same page here. Black swans typically have three criteria that define them. So the first is that we don't see them coming. We individually, at the individual level, some people do, right? There's always going to be somebody that is predicting the end of the world, that is calling out one risk or another. But the thing here is that at the aggregate level, we didn't see it. We didn't see it coming, or we would have prepared for it. The second is that they're a big deal. They usually impact us in huge ways. And the third is that we all kind of pretend like we saw them coming. That's sort of the weird thing. Like, I think if there's a joke where humanity is the punchline, it's somewhere in that third point. That there's this psychology at play that somehow afterwards we have to say like, oh yeah, we totally saw that coming, or I saw that coming. But maybe back to that second point, you know, these are big, big events. And imagine, for example, if we were having this conference now in 2020 in a different industry. Imagine if we were all restaurant workers or hospitality workers, right? What would be the tone? What would we be talking about? It would be very, very different. If you thought we were going to get through one conference talk without talking about COVID, I'm sorry, but I won't dwell on it. That's just, it's a very, it's an example of a black swan, right? That's what we're going through. Here's an exercise. So raise your hand if you have ever been hit by a meteor. Raise your hand if you have ever been through a supervolcano eruption. And raise your hand if you have ever observed the effects of a large coronal mass ejection on technology during a polar switch of the Earth's magnetic field. Did anybody raise their hand? Undoubtedly, a few of you did, and you're all smartasses, and you know who you are. But nobody here has. I will make that assertion, and I will stand by it. The thing is, these things do happen, though. So there's a cadence, right? There's an observed cadence to the kinds of asteroids, those impacts that knocked out the dinosaurs. Maybe not quite to that level, but there's huge impact craters all over the Earth. We know that these things happen. Supervolcanoes have erupted. And not only do we know that the Earth's magnetic poles switch occasionally, and that it's a process that takes thousands of years. And during that process, the strength of the magnetic field is reduced to something like 10% of normal. But that there are large coronal mass ejections that we've observed during our age, during the age of the telegraph, that fried all of our telegraph infrastructure. And that would certainly wreak havoc on our electrical grids today. So the black swans are coming for us all. We won't predict them. We won't be prepared for them. And we're all going to pretend like we were, that we knew they were coming. Jesus, Matt, that's dark, you say. And yeah, you're right, it is. Such are the times we live in. But that's not the point. That's not why I want to talk about these things. You as an individual, we as individuals do not have the power or the influence necessarily to protect all of mankind from big black swan events. But as individuals within our companies, within the organizations of which we are a part and have influence, we can protect those from black swan events. So how? How do we do that? I believe that the answer here is exploration. And this is, again, this is not my definition. So, but we explore. We explore the spaces in order to make things known out of the unknown. The thing here, one of the fundamental truths that I believe about humanity is that we really only learn from our own experiences, our own individual experiences, the things that we have lived through. This has consequences, this has ramifications for how our organizations operate. That essentially historical depth within your organization matters. Whether, essentially the combined experiences and the things that you as individuals within the organization know, have lived through, have experienced, helps to frame the kinds of things that you will be able to expect and deal with and sort of pull in from the unknown into known territory so that you can deal with it. But exploration is how we go about trying to grow our experience, that realm of experience that allows us to deal with those events. And it's not always an awful thing, right? Like the Black Swan is not always a harbinger of doom. As we talk about the Starship Enterprise, it actually goes out with a mission of hope. The idea there is to go out and explore new worlds, to find new life, to do wonderful things. Now, we focus on the drama because it's a television show and you have to have conflict. And so we always kind of, the television show is always about like bad thing happens and then we resolve it. It's very formulaic. To some extent that mirrors life too, but it leaves out in some places the really good things. There are things that the Black Swan has brought us, like penicillin and vulcanized rubber, and there's like a bajillion others we could talk about that were essentially mistakes. The Black Swan brought these to us too. They were big. Bringing like antibiotics to us was huge, and that was an accident. It was a mistake. So when we explore, we do so generally with two aims. From a business perspective, we have two objectives in exploration. One is to seek opportunity, to go out to find new market places that we can exploit and to find opportunity. The second is to mitigate risk, is to find those places where complexity is hiding the bad Black Swans, try to root them out and shoot them down. But there are some really interesting biases in how we frame this discussion and how we talk about this. And you can see this in how we just look at, for example, look at this question, right? What would you call somebody that looks for opportunities everywhere? We'd probably call them an innovator, a dreamer, a visionary, right? What would you call this same person if we said instead they look for threats everywhere? We'd probably call them paranoid. And it's interesting because both of these cases are super important for our business, but we have a bias towards one of them that's very attractive and great, and another one that's not so great. So how do we flip that on its head? Can we change that conversation? And so I asked the question here, but what if we're wearing a lab coat, right? What if instead of just like retreating into thought experiments, we actually have equipment, we have the ability to perform experiments, to wear lab coats, and try and kind of bring more process around this, because that's what the good things are too, right? That's what startups are, experiments. New products are experiments. We experiment all the time in looking for opportunities. Chaos gives us the opportunity to perform experiments into the threat space beyond just sort of the wild limits of thought experiments that sometimes get us into trouble. So back to exploration, this is a picture of a black hole. I think we've talked about now I think the relationship between complexity and unpredictability, or complexity and fragility, is something that should be fairly clear now. This is a black hole. This is a picture of, actually, it's an accretion disk that outlines a black hole. Now, the accretion disk is where matter that is collapsing into the black hole builds up. There's friction as it rotates the black hole. The friction generates heat, light, slows it down, gets sucked in the black hole. Our products are black holes for complexity. They accrete complexity without end. This is from XKCD. If you don't know what XKCD is, then I don't know what rock you're living under. I love this though, because it speaks to me, not only because it's of course funny because it's XKCD, but it helps show the problem that we encounter and why I say that our products accrete complexity without end. And that's because our products are built on products, are built on products, are built on products. It's turtles all the way down. And we don't have control over or a full depth of understanding of all of those products. It's why I say that in some ways, the full stack engineer is dead, that there is no such thing as a full stack engineer today. Maybe for an exceptionally small product, you can be a full stack engineer that fully understands the entire thing from top to bottom and can operate it, build it, that whole thing, right? But for most of us, the problems that we solve are so complex, the solutions that they require are so complex that no one person can understand the entire thing. Even if you understand the part that you built, the part that you built is founded on other parts that you didn't build, founded on other parts that they didn't build, again and again and again down the line. So complexity just continues to accrete over and over and over. And we need to find a way to rationalize it. Because the thing that we're learning here is that chaos is not just important for exploring threat space of sort of future threats. The interesting thing about chaos is that it actually, in some ways, is becoming necessary just to understand the behaviors of the monsters we've already built, just to understand where the black swans lie in wait in complexity in our systems. Not just through future developments, but the ones that exist right now. So I want to tell a story about that. And I know I've only got like a few minutes left, so I'm going to try and get through this. The super short version is my team worked with another team. They'd been having SEVs or production incidents, however you want to title it, for months. They had a hard time chasing down this problem. It was intermittent. And we went in and using chaos tools, were able to very quickly reproduce the problem. This was a messaging bus failing to, or rather a service failing to reconnect to a centralized messaging bus, again, intermittently. And we were able to just reproduce the failure, the conditions that created that failure over and over and over and over and over again ad nauseum until we saw the failure. We were able to reproduce it, get them a fix. Fantastic. This was huge. For our company, this was huge. The exposure, this problem, it had been, these were brilliant developers, fantastic programmers, but they hadn't been able to nail down this problem. They didn't have the tooling. Chaos allowed us to expose this problem and fix it. It was huge, very visible. But this isn't the best version of the story. The best version is historical fiction. And it goes something like this. We were doing chaos testing one day on the messaging bus, noticed this other service didn't reconnect, and we found the problem and fixed it. Customers were never impacted. That's the better version of that story. We never got to tell that version of the story because we're still going through our own transition now, right? Like we have different phases of being in adoption. But that's not flashy. And we have had versions of that story with other products and problems, but it's not flashy, it's not memorable. And so the tagline here is what is memorable is not always valuable, and what is valuable is not always memorable. So understand that there is a bias, there is a difficulty here in selling to your organization the value of things that didn't happen. So being able to say, hey, look, we didn't have a SEV is not the same as saying, wow, do you remember that SEV and how bad that was and how we fixed it? And that's the thing that we're going to have to overcome. All right, there's one other point that I want to make before I'll close things out, which is that you should know that there is a business case against reliability, or rather in favor of efficiency. So we know that there's a trade-off between efficiency and resiliency, efficiency and reliability, which is that if you go from 3 nines to 4 nines, 4 nines to 5 nines, as you increase along resiliency and reliability, you have costs that hockey stick and diminishing returns. And so you ramp up massively as you go from 3 nines to 4 nines, 4 nines to 5 nines, 5 nines to 6 nines, and nobody's doing 12 nines because you'd have to have a parallel universe that you fail over to, or multiple parallel universes. So efficiency, however, has this daily reminder of, hey, we saved costs here. We're pushing things in that direction. Resiliency, you really only remember when you have big problems. This tree, again, so after trimming, it looks ridiculous. It is like one big branch looming over my neighbor's house. It's unbalanced. It's going to fall. I have no idea how it didn't fall already. Insurance doesn't care. Insurance won't pay for it. They will pay for it if and when it falls, but insurance always calls a tree falling on a property an act of God. And our businesses do that too, right? When big things happen, we love to just write it off and say, well, that's an act of God. The black swan did this. We could have never predicted it. Bullshit. That is what chaos is for. So if there is one thing that you take away from this, it is know that there are going to be problems that you face pushing chaos within your organization. There are pressures, there are biases, there are psychological patterns of thought that we are programmed as humans that sort of disincentivize us from moving in this direction. And specifically for businesses, we are always pushing in the direction of efficiency. We want to increase the bottom line. We want to get more and more profit. We want to lower our expenses. And resiliency costs money. But the unpredictable, the unknown, has just as much impact, if not more, on your business than the known. And if you ever need to see evidence for that, look at all the black swan events that we've gone through. Look at all of the industries that are getting crushed right now. So being prepared for black swans, trying to find them, is one of the most important things we can do. This is another one of my stupid definitions, but that chaos is a verb, that it is to boldly go, to explore, to experiment, to combat the forces of complexity and kick black swan butt. And I hope that through the course of this talk, I have helped provide you with some arguments and talking points that'll equip you for your own journeys.